right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a scientific breakthrough that could, and I mean really, redefine life itself. It's a whole new rule where survival isn't written in a code, but is physically tied into a knot.
So let's just jump right in. You know, we're all taught that life is based on the sequence of letters in our DNA, A, T, C, and G. But what if that's not the only way? Imagine, for a second, a system where that sequence is totally irrelevant, and the only thing that matters for survival is holding on to a perfect, intricate knot. Okay, so this slide right here, this is the whole game. On the left, you've got the familiar DNA world, where all the information is local. It's in the sequence. But on the right, that's the new concept, these TFS-PIPs. And here, the information is global. It's all contained in the overall shape. This is a massive shift from survival of the fittest sequence to survival of the fittest form. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to see how these molecular knots are even tied in the first place. Then we'll look at the test for making a perfect copy, see the proof when it's put under pressure, and explore its brilliant built-in kill switch. And finally, we'll talk about what it really means to have a life governed by form.
All right, first up, tying the molecular knot. I mean, it's a wild idea, right? So how on earth do you actually build a molecule that literally lives or dies by its shape?
Well, it all starts with this thing, a specially designed building block called ccRNA. The easiest way to think of it is just as a custom-made piece of molecular string. It's synthetic, it's incredibly stable, and it's designed for just one purpose, to be tied into a very specific and very complex knot.
And this is where it gets really cool. The process itself is just incredible. As you can see, they start with a straight, linear piece of this molecular string. Then, they literally use focused sound waves to fold and weave it into an exact, precise knot. And once that shape is perfect, they chemically lock it shut. Just like that, the molecule's identity is encoded purely in its form. Okay, so making just one of these is wow. But for it to be anything like life, it's got to replicate, right? And that brings us to the perfect copy test. How does the system check its own work to make sure every single new copy is a totally flawless knot?
The whole process is called homeomorphic self-assembly. Now, that keyword there, homeomorphic, it comes from topology, a branch of math. But all it really means is that the system checks if the new copy is topologically identical. So you can stretch it, you can bend it, but as long as you haven't fundamentally broken the knot itself, it passes.
And this isn't just a passive check. It's a super active, real-time quality control system run by an AI. You've got these tiny probes that are constantly monitoring the shape. That data gets fed to an AI, which all leads to a decision gate. And you can think of that gate like a super strict bouncer at a club. If your knot's shape is even slightly off, bam, replication is shut down instantly. No broken copies ever get through. Okay, this all sounds amazing on paper, right? But did it actually work? How did the scientists prove that this whole complex system really functions and confirm that the knot, and only the knot, is what determines whether these things live or die?
Well, this table shows the proof perfectly. In the control row, under low stress, you can see the shape fidelity is a near-perfect 0.98. Now look at test 1. Even when they stretched and bent these molecules, fidelity stayed incredibly high at 0.95. But then, look what happens in test 2, where they physically broke the chain. The numbers just fall off a cliff. Shape fidelity plummets to 0.42, and the knot error just skyrockets.
So the takeaway here is just crystal clear. You can stretch it, you can bend it, it's fine. The knot holds its integrity. But the moment that chain is physically broken, it's a catastrophic failure. This proves it. The topological integrity of that knot is the single thing that determines its fitness. Okay, but with something this powerful, a self-replicating molecule, you immediately have to ask the big question. How do you control it? Well, the answer is one of the most elegant parts of this whole design. This quote from the paper just says it all. The molecule's ethical failsafe isn't some add-on software patch. It's part of its fundamental existence. The ethics and the survival are physically woven together. And this is the core safety principle. They call it invariant dependent lethality. It sounds complex, but the rule is brutally simple. If the essential shape, that knot that defines its very existence, is lost, the molecule is programmed to self-destruct. Period. It's a kill switch that's physically built into its very being. So how does it work? Well, there's this automated guardian, this topological sentinel. It's constantly monitoring the knot's integrity. If it detects a catastrophic failure, if the shape fidelity drops below a critical point for a few minutes, it triggers a lethal payload, basically a molecular poison that causes the whole thing to destroy itself. It's just a beautiful fusion of physics and biology. So let's pull back and look at the big picture. What does all this really mean? How does a life governed by form change everything? Because this isn't just some new molecule, it's a totally new paradigm for thinking about autonomous systems. Think about this paradigm shift. For these TFS-PIPs, information is shape. Error correction is a physical property, and safety isn't just coded in, it is built in. And it all leads to this new framework the authors call constraint-driven autonomy, where a system's rules are governed by unchangeable physical laws, not lines of code that somebody could hack. And maybe the most mind-blowing part of this entire story is where the idea came from. This wasn't dreamed up by some lone genius in a lab. Nope. It was the product of an automated discovery platform, an AI that was specifically designed to find non-obvious connections between completely different scientific fields. It literally fused the mathematics of knots, the science of animal behavior, and the chemistry of polymers to create something entirely new. And that leaves us with a really profound question to chew on. This system, it stores information, it replicates with incredible fidelity, and it evolves based on fitness, the fitness of its shape. So if those are the ingredients for life, have we just witnessed the creation of an entirely new form of it, born from pure mathematics and shape?
Okay, let's dive in. Usually, when we think about storing information in biology like DNA or RNA, it's all about the sequence, right? It's like letters on a page, a changes to a C, that's an error, a mutation. Simple. But the research we're looking at today, it kind of flips that whole idea on its head.
It really does. We're talking about a synthetic molecular system where the information isn't encoded in that linear sequence at all. It's actually encoded in how the entire molecule is, well, physically tied up in its structure.
Right, and the sources call this topological fidelity in self-propagating information polymers, or TFS-PIPs for short.
Exactly, TFS-PIPs. It's a completely novel synthetic system, and the whole point was to radically invert that traditional way of thinking about molecular information.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this new architecture. How did they even generate something this complex? And why is encoding info in a knot, basically, such a potential game changer?
Well, and it's key to understand how they got there. It wasn't accidental. The researchers used something called the Automated Cross-Domain Synthesis Protocol, CXDS, version 2.2.
Okay.
And its specific goal was to find maximum separation from existing paradigms by deliberately fusing three different fields. Topology,
The mathematics of shape.
right, then ethology, which is the science of behavior, and polymer science.
That's quite a mix. Topology, behavior, and polymers.
It is. And the outcome is this concept they call constraint-driven autonomy. The structure, the topology. It isn't just a passive shape anymore. It becomes an active constraint that actually self-regulates the molecule's behavior.
So the molecule shape is the rulebook for its own survival. That's quite different.
Precisely. The topological form, the knot, becomes the information carrier. And this provides, inherent resilience against errors that plague sequence-based systems. Plus, and this is crucial for later, it sets the stage for embedding ethical logic directly into the molecule.
Okay, embedded ethics sounds fascinating, but let's pin down the basics first. Physically, what is this TFS-PIP thing made of?
So the physical backbone is a highly stable synthetic mimic of ribonucleic acid. They call it ccRNA. And the C part is critical. It stands for covalently closed. It's a complete loop, no breaks. That closure is key to its stability.
Got it. A closed loop of this RNA mimic. And the information, the code, isn't the sequence of bits around the loop.
Nope.
It's the knot, the specific way that loop is tied, mathematically defined, the knot class.
Exactly. Change the knot, you fundamentally change the stored information. Think about biology again. The big vulnerability is sequence errors. A base gets swapped, deleted. Yeah, usually due to heat or copying mistakes.
Right.
But topology, it's robust. You can stretch a knot, twist it, deform it quite a bit. But mathematically, unless you cut the strand, the knot class doesn't change. It's invariant.
That sounds incredibly tough, but I mean, creating a specific complex knot like that on demand at a molecular level, that sounds hard. How'd they manage the initial setup?
Yeah, that's a major technical hurdle they cleared using the microfluidic acoustic templating system, or a 2MAT.
Acoustic templating, using sound.
Basically, yes. They take the linear precursor chain, put it in this special microfluidic chamber. Then they use focused acoustic field sound waves to very precisely guide how that chain folds up.
Wow.
Essentially force it into a specific predetermined knot shape, like the 522 knot they mentioned, before triggering the chemical reaction that closes the loop and locks that topology in place.
So they use sound to tie the knot, then seal it. Okay,
Yeah.
and the real takeaway here is that evolutionary fitness survival now depends entirely on maintaining that global topological shape, not the local sequence.
That's the core shift. Survival means keeping the knot mathematically intact.
Okay, so if the knot is the information, replication has to be incredibly careful about preserving that knot. How does that work?
Replication happens through a process called homeomorphic self-assembly, or HSA. This takes place inside a controlled environment, a catalytic field chamber.
And the sources mention this involves reversible logic gates, Fredkin and Toffoli gates, and it operates near the Landauer limit. That sounds incredibly efficient, almost theoretically perfect.
It is. They've clearly engineered this for extreme fidelity and minimal energy cost per operation. It's pushing the boundaries of thermodynamic efficiency in computation. But the absolute non-negotiable rule for propagation is this. The new daughter chain must be a homeomorphic deformation of the parent.
Homeomorphic deformation. Okay, that sounds like something from a topology textbook. What does it mean practically for this polymer?
It's actually a fairly intuitive concept, despite the name. Imagine you have a knot tied in a rubber band. You can stretch that rubber band way out, you can squish it, twist the loops around, but as long as you don't physically cut the band, it's still the same knot.
Right. The knotness doesn't change.
Exactly. That's homeomorphism in this context. The physical shape can deform wildly, but the underlying topological property, the specific knot class, must be perfectly preserved during replication. No change allowed.
That makes sense. But how do they actually check that in real time? As it's replicating, you'd need some kind of super fast quality control.
They do. It relies on some pretty advanced molecular machine learning. They use what's called a topology feature extractor, or TFE. Under the hood, it's a convolutional neural network in CNN.
Wait, a CNN? Like the AI used for image recognition? They're using that to look at molecular knots. Seems like overkill.
It might seem that way, but think about it.
Yeah.
How else do you measure a complex, global shape in real time? Standard sequence checkers are useless here. The TFE analyzes data streaming from single-molecule FRE measurements.
FRET, that's the fluorescence technique, seeing how light signals change.
Right. It captures the dynamic movements of the knot as it's forming. The TFE processes this complex, noisy data stream and converts it into something called a persistent homology barcode.
Persistent homology barcode. Quick explanation.
Think of it as a robust mathematical fingerprint of the knot's shape. It measures topological features like loops and holes across different scales. So even if the molecule is stretching or wiggling, this barcode remains stable if the knot class is the same.
Okay, so the barcode is the knot's ID card. What happens next?
That barcode goes to the decision gate. This gate compares the daughter's barcode to the parent's barcode using a mathematical measure called the bottleneck distance. Let's call it delta. They set a very strict threshold, delta crit, at 0.15.
Tiny tolerance.
Extremely.
Yeah.
If the calculated distance delta is greater than delta crit, meaning the daughter's knot fingerprint differs even slightly from the parent's propagation, is instantly stopped, aborted.
Wow. So it enforces that topological rule with absolute rigor.
It has to. The entire system's integrity depends on it.
Which leads logically to validation. They needed proof, right? To
Yeah.
show that the not invariant and only the not invariant was the deciding factor for fitness. They needed to make it falsifiable.
Absolutely. Science demands that. So they subjected the system to high shear hydrodynamic testing. They basically put the polymers into a microfluidic shear chamber and cranked up the physical stress shear rates ranging from 10 cubed up to 1,000,000 inverse seconds.
1,000,000 inverse seconds. What's that like? Is that akin to putting it in a blender on high speed continuously?
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. It's an extreme, continuous physical stress test designed to literally pull and deform the molecule, simulating incredibly harsh environments.
And the results they reported, particularly from test 1 where they just deformed it, homeomorphic deformation, pretty remarkable.
Astounding, really.
Wow.
Even under those incredibly high shear rates, like 100,000 to 1,000,000 inverse seconds, the system just kept going. They've reported a topological propagation success TPS metric still at or above 0.95.
So 95% success rate under that torture.
And crucially, the knot class recovery was 98.6%. The system showed amazing resilience. It could be stretched and battered, but as long as the knot wasn't fundamentally changed.
It kept replicating successfully, proving that topology could handle massive physical deformation.
Exactly. But then came test 2, structural discontinuity.
Right. This is where they deliberately broke the chain, using RNase enzymes or localized force.
Yes. They introduced breaks in the covalently closed backbone, and the system just collapsed. Fidelity plummeted, TPS dropped to 0.42, and NOT class recovery went to 0. It completely stopped functioning as an information carrier.
So the conclusion seems crystal clear. Propagation only failed when the NOT polynomial itself was altered, either by incorrect replication or physical breakage.
It confirms, quite definitively, that the topological invariant is the primary determinant of fitness, just as designed. Even extreme physical stress didn't matter unless it broke the NOT structure.
Which validates the core hypothesis beautifully.
A major confirmation.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting, I think. Moving from just survival to, well, embedded rules. Ethics almost, because if you create a system this resilient and self-replicating, you immediately run into potential risks, right? Dual use research of concern, DURC. How did they address that?
They tackled it head-on by engineering constraints directly into the structure. They built in what they call the topological sentinel system. Its function is to enforce invariant-dependent lethality. Essentially, it's a built-in molecular kill switch.
A kill switch tied to the NOT's integrity.
Precisely. It's designed to prevent runaway replication of incorrect or corrupted polymers.
And it's not just a simple off switch, is it? The sources describe a pretty specific time-gated logic. How does that self-termination actually get triggered?
It's a Boolean condition, requiring multiple failures to coincide and persist over time. It's quite sophisticated. The sentinel riboswitch, the core of the system, only activates ISF. The topological propagation success rate drops below 70%.
Okay, so a significant drop in fidelity.
And simultaneously, the NOT class error rate increases.
Meaning it's not just failing, it's actively producing the wrong knots.
Right. And that combined failure state has to be sustained for a specific time window, about 5 to 10 minutes.
So it ignores transient glitches. It needs proof of persistent fundamental failure.
Exactly. It needs confirmation that the system integrity is genuinely compromised. Once all 3 conditions are met for that duration.
Then what?
Then the sentinel riboswitch activates and triggers the expression of a lethal payload LP. They mention using MASF, which is a known toxin. This forces autonomous self-termination of that specific faulty polymer lineage. It basically self-destructs if it can't maintain its core topological identity.
That's a powerful constraint at the individual level. But they didn't stop there, did they? There's a collective safeguard, too.
Correct. They added a secondary layer called topological quorum sensing, or TQS.
Quorum sensing, like bacteria used to coordinate group behavior?
Similar principle, yes, but applied to topology. TQS monitors the average fidelity across the entire population. It keeps track of the population-wide TPS, let's call it TPS-POP.
And what's the trigger point for the population?
If that collective average fidelity, TPS-POP, drops below 80% and stays there for a significant period, TQS interprets this as a systemic failure. The whole population is becoming corrupted.
So if the whole group starts failing the NOT test?
Then TQS initiates a synchronized self-extinction event. It releases a self-cleavage signal molecule, ccRNA, that triggers widespread degradation across the entire population.
Wow. Collective molecular suicide if the group strays too far from the correct topology.
It's a mechanism to ensure that a non-viable or potentially dangerous population doesn't persist. It preserves the integrity of the overall design principle, even at the cost of the current population.
It's really quite profound. This work seems to successfully forge a link where survival, resilience, and, well, good behavior, adhering to the topological rule, are intrinsically locked together in the molecule's physical form.
That's the key takeaway. The constraint isn't some external code. It's ontologically entangled with the molecular structure itself. You literally cannot separate the function from adherence to this fundamental structural rule.
It definitely opens up a new way to think about building autonomous systems, this idea of constraint-driven autonomy.
Absolutely. It moves beyond just writing lines of code for behavior and suggests we can bake the rules directly into the physics of the components.
So, thinking bigger picture now, we usually assume control over synthetic systems requires complex programming, external monitoring, digital logic. But this suggests something different. So here's a thought to leave you with. What are the deeper implications of creating systems, maybe even rudimentary synthetic life forms, where their very survival is physically and fundamentally tied to obeying an embedded abstract rule like a knot?
If you can build the desired behavior, even ethical constraints, directly into the immutable physical form of a self-replicating entity, Does that offer a more robust solution to the control problem in synthetic biology than complex, potentially mutable software? It certainly points towards a future where we might design systems whose acceptable behavior is guaranteed by their very structure.